I had never imagined the kind of emotions that would swirl in my chest the day I ended up living with my stepbrother. It was supposed to be a short-term arrangement, an emergency after my parents decided to take an unexpected trip abroad, and I was left alone with nowhere to go. He'd moved in with my family a year ago, and we'd always gotten along, sharing casual conversations and common interests. He was fun, easygoing, and the last person I'd ever expected to stir up such complicated feelings in me. But then, one night, things changed. I remember it like it was yesterday, sitting together on the couch, watching a movie, the space between us becoming smaller as the night went on. There was a familiarity that we had built over the months, but now, as I looked at him in the dim light, it wasn't just comfort I felt. There was something more. Something unfamiliar and urgent. He looked at me differently too, with a quiet intensity that was hard to ignore. At first, I dismissed it as nothing. He was my stepbrother after all. Those types of connections weren't supposed to cross into this territory, but we both knew the tension was there, and when I caught him staring at me one evening, it hit me. There was no way this was just sibling-like affection anymore. It didn't take long before our moments of silence turned into something heavier. One night, while my parents were on a video call with me from their trip, I noticed him looking at me strangely, almost vulnerably. My heart raced as I realized we were on the edge of something dangerous. The bond we had grown was twisting into something more, and neither of us knew how to stop it. That night, when my parents were still busy, I found myself alone with him in the kitchen. Our conversation started casually, but there was a shift in the air. Our words were just a prelude to what we both feared was inevitable. The lines between family and desire blurred, and I felt myself crossing a threshold I knew I could never return from. The kiss was soft, tentative, like both of us were waiting for the other to pull back. But neither of us did. There was no denying the pull we had toward each other. It felt wrong, but it also felt like it was meant to happen. What followed was a whirlwind of emotions that I could hardly comprehend. Guilt, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal haunted me. How could I have done something like this with my stepbrother? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just physical attraction that had led me here. It was the emotional distance I had felt in my own relationship with my partner, the yearning for something more that I hadn't been able to fill. We didn't speak about it the next day. There was a silence between us that neither of us dared to break. The weight of what had happened hung heavily in the air, an unspoken secret we both carried like a burden. As the days went by, the guilt consumed me. I couldn't stop thinking about what had transpired, and I wondered if he felt the same. I had never expected this to happen, but there we were, tangled in emotions that were impossible to unravel. Eventually, it all came crashing down. I had to face the truth. I wasn't just dealing with guilt, but with the unraveling of my own emotional needs. What had started as a simple living arrangement had turned into an emotional minefield. I realized that infidelity wasn't just about breaking physical boundaries. It was about the failure to address the emotional distance that had built up in my primary relationship. I had betrayed my partner, and worse, I had betrayed my own values. Yet, in the mess of it all, there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the emotional connection I had shared with my stepbrother. The truth was that I had felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. When my parents returned, the silence was deafening. Neither my stepbrother nor I spoke of what had happened, but I knew that living under the same roof again would be impossible. The complex web of emotions, guilt, confusion, and a twisted sense of attachment had made it clear that nothing would ever be the same. What had once been a familial bond had turned into something far more complicated, and the truth was we were both left to deal with the aftermath in our own ways. Emotional attachment versus physical boundaries is a central theme in many real-life stories of infidelity, where individuals find themselves caught between deep emotional connections and the limitations they know should exist within the confines of relationships. In relationships where people form close bonds with one another, the line between affection, emotional intimacy, and romantic attraction can become increasingly blurred. This complexity becomes particularly evident in situations where the individuals involved have known each other for a long time, such as in familial settings, friendships, or even workplace relationships. Over time, feelings of emotional dependency can evolve in ways that catch both parties off guard. What often starts as a platonic or familial connection can, under certain circumstances, shift into something more profound, setting the stage for emotional attachment that defies physical boundaries. This emotional attachment is often so subtle and gradual that individuals may not even realize its development. It isn't a sudden or overt occurrence, but rather a slow-building connection that develops from shared experiences, vulnerability, and moments of closeness. It might manifest in the way two people spend time together, confide in each other, and share personal feelings or intimate moments. Emotional intimacy often flourishes in these situations because it involves a deep sense of understanding and comfort between individuals. In many cases, emotional attachments like these are far more powerful than mere physical attraction. These feelings arise from shared trust, empathy, and the security that one feels in the presence of another person. What begins as a bond of support can evolve into a more complex set of emotions that stir feelings of longing, desire, or even jealousy, particularly if one person begins to realize that the connection is more profound than they initially believed. The problem with such emotional attachments is that they can be all-consuming, sometimes overpowering logic and reason. In many cases, emotional attachments lead individuals to seek comfort and solace from the person they feel most emotionally connected to, even when that person may not be an appropriate partner for their romantic or physical needs. This is where the challenge of maintaining physical boundaries arises. People often know what is considered appropriate and acceptable in relationships, whether that is within the confines of marriage, a long-term partnership, or even familial connections. However, these boundaries can easily become obscured when the emotional connection becomes overwhelming. The attachment may reach a point where the emotional needs of one or both individuals feel so strong that they are difficult to resist, leading them to push past the physical boundaries they had once respected. An example of this dynamic can often be seen in relationships where one person feels emotionally neglected or unfulfilled. In these instances, an individual may begin to seek emotional validation from someone else, perhaps a close friend, family member, or even a colleague. This external connection can offer the intimacy or attention that may be missing from their primary relationship, creating an emotional bond that quickly develops into something deeper. The emotional attachment feels like a lifeline, and the person may justify the growing closeness as simply a need for emotional support or companionship. However, when these emotional needs become intertwined with physical desires or unspoken romantic attraction, the result can be a breach of boundaries that were previously held sacred. This situation is particularly complicated because the feelings involved are often not black and white. Unlike physical attraction, which is often more obvious and easier to identify, emotional attachment is layered and multifaceted. It can involve feelings of trust, dependence, care, and shared experiences, which makes it difficult to recognize when these emotions have crossed into dangerous territory. Often, the individual involved may not even realize they are developing romantic feelings for the other person, and their initial belief that their bond is purely emotional may be a form of self-deception. They might not acknowledge the romantic undertones until it's too late, and the attachment has evolved beyond what was initially intended. This lack of awareness is one of the reasons why emotional attachment can sometimes lead to infidelity. It is not a premeditated decision, but a complex set of emotions that evolve over time, sometimes unintentionally. The complication comes when the individual realizes that the attachment they have formed is no longer simply emotional but romantic or physical. This realization often triggers a range of conflicting emotions: guilt, shame, confusion, and regret. The emotional bond they share with the other person might feel too significant to ignore, yet at the same time, they understand that crossing into a romantic or physical territory would be a betrayal of their primary relationship. The emotional attachment becomes a source of internal conflict as the person grapples with the pull of their feelings and the awareness of the consequences of their actions. In many cases, this results in a sense of helplessness, where the person feels trapped between their emotional attachment and the moral or social boundaries they know they should adhere to. What makes emotional attachment versus physical boundaries so difficult to navigate is that the feelings involved are often incredibly nuanced. While physical attraction might feel straightforward, either the desire is there or it isn't. The emotional attachment is far more complex. It is often based on mutual support, shared trust, and a deep sense of understanding, which makes it all the more difficult to disentangle. The emotional bond creates a sense of security and closeness that can mask the developing attraction, leading to moments of physical intimacy that feel almost inevitable. As a result, individuals may justify their actions by believing that the emotional connection they share with the other person is the driving force behind their choices, rather than acknowledging the ways in which their physical boundaries have been crossed.